is Sean Fairchild from Bass Gear Magazine, and today we're taking a look at no fewer than 4 pedals from Trickfish Amplification. Let's check them out. Trickfish has recently released their signal filter, VCA compressor, external preamp, and overdrive preamp. They were kind enough to send them all to us. I'm going to play through each one separately and kind of discuss each as its own thing. My bass is in passive mode right now, so everything that you're hearing won't be influenced by anything on board my instrument. Now, all these guys live in the same size enclosure, and they all have top-mounted inputs and outputs, both for power and signal, which allows them to live very close to each other on a pedal board, as I have them arranged here. All right, let's start with signal filter. So not a ton of bass players are yet aware of how useful this type of effect can be. It's something that's used every time you record anything in a studio by an engineer to help hone, to help cut out the sonic space that each instrument takes up. But it's very effective using yourself on a pedal board for a couple of reasons. So this pedal is both a high-pass filter and a low-pass filter. A high-pass filter cuts out lows, even though it has high in its name, right? It crosses over, it filters out everything above a certain point and allows that to pass. A low-pass filter is the opposite, and those of you who are familiar with synthesizers may be more familiar with this concept. A low-pass filter is everything passes up until a certain frequency, and then everything above that is not allowed through the filter. The Trickfish signal filter has both of these types of filters, and you can engage them both separately. And so there is the high-pass filter, or the low cut. There is the low-pass filter, or the high cut, and you can control each filter's frequency point, the point at which the filter starts doing what it does, with these knobs up here. And the filters have very steep slopes, 24 decibel slopes. That means that very little sonic information beyond the point that you set is going to be allowed through the filter. And then there's an overall makeup gain here for the high-pass filter signal. So if you lose any perceived volume, you can bump up your signal a little bit to help offset that. So how would you use these things? Well, a high-pass filter is really, really useful for cutting out all of the subsonic territory frequency that, first of all, your speaker cabinets are not very good at reproducing. And second of all, it uses up a ton of headroom, uses up all of your amp's available power. Low frequencies are exponentially more costly in terms of power to amplify than higher frequencies. So you could set this high-pass filter to a point at which you're not really losing any perceived bass, any perceived low end, but you're cleaning things up. There's a bunch of stuff that you're not perceiving. There's a bunch of subsonic sounds that you're not perceiving, but your amp is trying really hard to reproduce. So by cutting that stuff out, it kind of tightens everything up, cleans everything up, makes your amp have more headroom. It gives you more headroom to use, more available volume if you're finding that your amp is kind of maxed out in terms of volume. This is a great thing to try to get a little bit more useful perceived sound pressure level from it. In talking with Ryan from Trickfish, he actually had a really kind of cool use case that I would not have immediately thought of, using both filters independently. So keeping the high-pass filter on all the time, sort of a global level, to filter out the really low subsonic stuff. But then using the low pass filter for an instant vibe change, sort of like an instant Motown-y sort of thing, or in the same song to go back and forth between like slap sections and really kind of more muted fingerstyle sections, which I'm about to do for you in just a second here. And that's cool because unlike using a tone knob where you might not nail the exact same setting every single time when you're going back and forth between those two sounds, this allows you to do that. You've got a specific frequency point. You can hit it. You can change on a, stop on a dime, change on a whim, and it happens right away. So I'm going to try to demonstrate that for you right now. All right, moving on to the VCA compressor. It's my favorite type of compressor. If you are unaware of this, there are several types of compressors, several technologies that provide compression, and they all kind of sound different. The VCA compressor is, again, something that's very common in a studio environment. It's usually very clean. It's used when you want a clean compression sound, and one of my all-time favorite compressors, the SSL bus compressor, is a VCA compressor type. So instantly, I liked Trickfish's VCA compressor. One thing that you might notice here, and I'll kind of zoom in on the dials, but one thing that you might notice is that there are not controls for attack and release. I wasn't sure how I would feel about that in practical usage, but in practical usage, what I found is that it's actually really freeing to not have to worry about those two controls in addition with all the others. In speaking with the company, they said that the attack time is somewhere on the order of 40 milliseconds, so it's a pretty slow attack, and that means it takes 40 milliseconds for not for the compressor to begin compressing, but for it to reach its full ratio of compression. So it's a gradual ramp up to the full compression ratio that you set with the ratio knob. The other controls you have here are threshold and level. Threshold, of course, sets where the compressor starts kicking in terms of volume, in terms of the voltage your instrument is putting out. And then level allows you to make up some of the gain that you lose from squashing everything down, making it more even. Aside from that, we have a blend, of course, so you can do full-on parallel style compression, which I'm a huge fan of. And finally, we have a 10-segment LED that really helps you see the levels of compression that you are achieving. And if you talk to engineers, there's a danger that people talk about in hearing with your eyes, and sort of using too much visual information to ascertain what whether an effect is doing what you want it to do, or that sort of thing. But in this case, it's really convenient. It's really handy to see the amount of gain reduction that you're getting, and of course, it correlates with what you're hearing. Something else that's cool about Trickfish's VCA compressor is that the ratio control, bing, right there, is fully variable. So instead of just being presets, as a lot of software compressors are, obviously, and a lot of pedals themselves, presets for 2-to-1, 3-to-1, 4-to-1, 8-to-1. Here you get a continuously variable control, which is really cool. So all the way clockwise, there's a little infinity symbol. So I'm guessing that basically acts as a limiter in this case, but it's got all the major stops demarcated along the way. With a 40 millisecond attack time, you're going to get a lot of initial transient. You're going to get a lot of initial punch to your note. So it's not necessarily a compressor that is meant to be used in such a way where it just doesn't allow anything above, your threshold through. It's going to allow an initial nice transient, which makes things sound so punchy and thick. It's great. And of course, using that when blending in with your dry signal, you get a nice mix of the unfiltered, the unaffected signal to kind of balance everything out. You're going to see all that at play in these playing examples right here. All right, let's move on to the EPA, the external preamp. If you are a Trickfish fan, you might be aware that they offer an internal preamp called the IPA. So it makes sense that their external preamp would then be the EPA. And it is actually the exact same circuit. So it's the exact same thing that you get with the IPA with very minor changes to make it suitable for being in a pedal enclosure. Obviously you get a foot pedal bypass, but it has the same frequency centers and switchable frequency centers that the IPA features. And those are accessed internally via a series of dip switches. And when you pull off the cover, the back cover, there's even a little cheat sheet in there that shows you the position of dip switches and what frequency that provides. That's clearly a very versatile preamp with the changeable frequency centers internally via those dip switches for bass, mid, and treble, each of the three bands. However, we're deciding here to test it as it comes straight out of the box to better represent a new user's initial impression of the pedal and of the preamp itself. Again, my bass is in passive configuration. When I've got this knob pulled up, it's passive. So what you're going to hear is not influenced by my onboard preamp of this bass. And I'm running directly from the bass through these pedals into my Gallien-Kruger head back there. It's a Fusion 1200S head, and that's going straight into the mixing board and into Ableton. Now we arrive at the final pedal, the Overdrive preamp, and it's one that Ryan tells me that they put a lot of thought and effort into. And in fact, there's a great little anecdote. There's a great story about this effect's genesis, and it goes back to a studio experience that Ryan had. Trying to get sort of a gritty tone, a mix of a gritty tone with a straight bass tone in the studio via a Vox guitar amp. So he was running through a bass amp and a separate guitar amp and had a lot of trouble getting kind of the right gain settings. That I think he mentioned that the amp was actually broken. So taking this scenario out on the road on tour with the group that he was playing with, he continued to do the same thing. I think he was using a Fender amp in that case, and in really cool fashion, he was running a Y signal split that was branching off his bass signal to go to the bass rig and to the guitar amp. But before it hit the guitar amp, it went through a volume pedal. So he could bring in that distorted guitar amp sound in a variable way, very easily through this rocker pedal in real time. They tried to capture that vibe, they tried to capture that ability with this effect. look like a somewhat more typical bass overdrive pedal, but it's not in a couple of key ways that I'm going to explain here. So one item is that it is definitely an overdrive style pedal. It's not a fuzz pedal. It doesn't have that kind of almost kazoo-like clipping ability in it, at least from the input levels that I was putting into it. It's not like a lead distortion type of sound unless you just hit it with a ton of gain, but it's a soft clipping overdrive pedal, which is great. So the gain is adjustable via the gain knob in the top left. And then we go over to the output level. So these effects along the top, or these controls along the top, gain, blend, and output, are not connected in that order. So the output level actually only controls the distortion signal's output. Having this separate output level for the distortion channel allows you to even more carefully sculpt and kind of dictate the specific blend of dry signal to distorted signal, not just having to do that with a gain and blend because maybe you want that gain kind of backed off and then it doesn't give you enough boost for the type of effect you're looking for. Perhaps it's like a solo volume boost. So you can make that up with the output level control here, and then the blend control comes in to determine the overall amount of dry bass signal with overdriven bass signal. The 3-band EQ that you see here, we have bass, mid, and treble. That actually only applies to the overdrive channel. So again, you get a ton of sonic flexibility, of sonic sculptability that allows you to really determine how the overdrive sounds, just like using its own amp, just like having a separate amp that you're running through, and then blending that in with your bass rig. So in that way, I think it's kind of an interesting approach to achieve those results that Ryan was getting from the 2-amp setup while he was out on the road and on those studio dates. It's a clever take on a bass overdrive, and I appreciate the versatility that it offers. This may not be a big deal to anybody else, but I have used and reviewed a lot of pedals before that use blue LEDs, in which the blue LED is blindingly bright. It's just so bright, and the contrast of that thing just searing a hole through your eyeballs on a dark stage at night can be really annoying. So I really appreciate how they were able to tamp down the voltage to these blue LEDs. I know it's the most picky little funny thing to mention, but it's one of those little fine touches that really, it's like a nice quality of life thing when you're using these things live. I really appreciate that they were able to get those LEDs, to get those guys the brightness that they are without just really blowing you away visually. So while at first blush, each of these pedals may perhaps seem to fit into kind of more well-established effect archetypes for bass or guitar, a closer look may reveal that each one of these has a subtle set of features, either sonic or usability-wise, that may make the difference for you between just a sound that you enjoyed more than another pedal on the market, or a usability item that could turn into a practical necessity in using one of these in a different way from how you could use another pedal of the same type, or a way that you have done so in the past. Something that allows you to do something different or something greater than what you have done. That's kind of the case with the signal filter, with having control over both of those filters and using it in that creative way to turn the low-pass filter on and off. The VCA compressor is just great to not have to worry about the attack and release controls. The external preamp, obviously tons and tons of flexibility there depending on where you set the internal frequency centers. And the Overdrive preamp allowing you to fully sculpt your overdriven signal, complete with separate 3-band EQ, separate output level, and gain control, and then give you a blend on top of that. It's not something that a lot of effects that I've come across have offered. All right, you guys, thank you so much for joining me. Again, my name is Sean Fairchild for Bass Gear Magazine. We've been looking at these 4 Trickfish pedals. Make sure you like and subscribe and all that good stuff. And when you subscribe, make sure you hit the notification icon, the little bell, so that you are first to know when we drop something new like this. We're often the first folks to review new exciting pieces of gear. So make sure you're getting the most up-to-date information as you can before you make a gear purchasing decision. So once again, thank you for watching, and make sure to join us next time. I'm already missing you. I'm already longing for the next opportunity to be with you.